You want to shoot the Barrett? Sweetheart, that rifle weighs more than you do. Why don't you go play with the 22s where you belong? The range safety officer's voice carried across the entire firing line, drawing snickers from the dozen Marines practicing their quarterly qualifications. The woman standing at the counter didn't react. She simply signed her name on the range log with the same steady hand that had squeezed triggers in places these men couldn't pronounce, in conditions they couldn't imagine. Her civilian clothes, faded jeans, and an oversized flannel shirt gave no hint of the body armor she'd worn for 3 tours, no indication of the ghillie suits she'd crafted by hand in the mountains of Afghanistan. But when General Harrison walked through the range doors and saw her stance, the way she checked the wind flags without conscious thought, the way her fingers traced firing solutions in the air, something in his memory clicked. If you believe quiet competence speaks louder than arrogant assumptions, type respect below. The range safety officer, Staff Sergeant Martinez, continued his performance for the gathered Marines. Ma'am, I'm serious. The Barrett M82 isn't some toy you can just pick up because you saw it in a movie. The recoil alone would probably dislocate your shoulder. This is a .50 caliber anti-material rifle. It's designed to punch through engine blocks and light armor at over a mile. We've got Marines here who've been training for months just to qualify on it, and most of them can't hit past 800 meters consistently. He gestured toward the observation area, where several junior officers had gathered, sensing entertainment. Tell you what, I'll let you watch from behind the safety glass while Corporal Johnson here demonstrates proper technique. He's our battalion's top marksman. The woman's eyes shifted briefly to the target boards at the far end of the range, calculating distances, reading mirage patterns in the heat waves rising from the concrete. She noticed the metal gong at the extreme distance marker, 2,000 meters, rusted and unmarked by recent impacts. I'll sign the waiver, she said quietly, her first word since entering the facility. Martinez laughed, shaking his head. Lady, a waiver won't fix a separated shoulder or a concussion from improper shooting position. You don't understand what you're asking for. General Harrison moved closer, his attention drawn to the woman's hands as she pulled a small notebook from her back pocket. The way she flipped through its weathered pages, filled with ballistic tables and hand-drawn range cards, triggered something deeper in his memory. He'd seen that exact notebook design before, issued only to graduates of the Marine Corps' Advanced Sniper course at Quantico. More specifically, to the handful who completed the classified high-angle/long-range maritime operations program that produced snipers capable of engaging targets from helicopters and ships in heavy seas. Staff Sergeant, the general interrupted, his voice cutting through Martinez's continued protests. Process her waiver and prepare the Barrett for firing. Martinez spun around, recognizing the 3 stars on Harrison's collar. Sir, with all due respect, this civilian doesn't have any experience with. Harrison raised one hand, silencing him. Did you check her name against the range's authorized personnel database? Martinez fumbled with his computer terminal, typing in the name from the log. The screen flashed red, then required his supervisor override. When he entered it, the screen went black before displaying a single line. Classification level insufficient. The general walked behind the counter himself, entered his command authorization code, and watched as the full record populated. The silence that followed was absolute. Martinez's face drained of color as he read the screen. Marine Scout Sniper, Honor Graduate, Quantico Class 2 to 15. Combat Deployments, 6. Confirmed Kills, Classified. Longest confirmed kill, 3,176 meters, Helmand Province, 2018. Current status, Defense Intelligence Agency, Analytical Targeting Division. Certifications, Urban Sniper Operations, Aerial Platform Engagement, Maritime Interdiction, High-Value Target Elimination. The woman had already moved to the equipment locker, professionally inspecting the Barrett that Johnson had been preparing. Her movements were automatic, muscle memory from thousands of repetitions. She checked the barrel for obstructions, verified the scope's 0 marking, tested the trigger pull weight with her index finger. Johnson stepped back instinctively, recognizing the practiced efficiency of someone who had lived with these weapons rather than simply trained on them. Distance to the far gong? She asked Harrison directly, already knowing the answer but following range protocol. 2,000 meters. No one's hit it in 3 years, he replied. Wind flags show 8 to 10 from the west, gusting to 15, she nodded, pulling a small Kestrel weather meter from her pocket, another detail that marked her as a professional. She took readings for temperature, humidity, barometric pressure, density altitude. Martinez watched her input the data into a ballistic calculator app on her phone, one he recognized as the same military-grade software used by Special Operations Forces. The Marines had formed a semicircle behind the firing line, their quarterly qualification forgotten in favor of this unexpected drama. She settled behind the Barrett with a fluidity that made the massive rifle seem like an extension of her body. Her breathing slowed, her heart rate dropping into the zone that military snipers call the bubble, that state of hyper-aware calm where time dilates and every environmental factor becomes crystal clear. Through the scope, she read the mirage, watching the heat waves bend and shift, telling her stories about wind patterns at different distances that the flags couldn't reveal. She dialed 11 minutes of angle into the elevation turret, 4.5 minutes left for wind, then paused, feeling a subtle pressure change that suggested an updraft from the heated concrete. She added another half-minute of elevation. Sending, she announced, the traditional sniper's warning before taking a shot. The Barrett's thunderous report shook the covered firing line, but she had already absorbed the recoil, riding it like a wave rather than fighting it. The bullet traced its arc across nearly 1.25 miles of space, fighting gravity and wind for 3 long seconds. Then the distant gong rang out, clear and true. She worked the bolt, chambering another round. Wind shift. She murmured to herself, reading something in the mirage that no one else could see. 2 clicks right on the windage. The second shot rang out. Another hit, this one dead center, the impact visible through the spotting scopes. By the 5th round, she had established a rhythm that transformed the brutal Barrett into a precision instrument. Every shot found its mark, painting a group on the distant target that would have been impressive at half the distance. When she safed the weapon and stood, the range was silent except for the ringing of the distant gong still vibrating from her final shot. General Harrison had pulled her complete service record on his tablet. "Gentlemen," he addressed the assembled Marines, his voice carrying the weight of command. "You're looking at former Gunnery Sergeant Sarah Chun, MARSOC Special Operations, currently on loan to the DIA for classified operations support. In 2018, she held Overwatch for a SEAL team extraction in Afghanistan for 14 hours, eliminating 17 threats at ranges exceeding 2,000 meters. In 2019, she successfully engaged hostile watercraft from a helicopter platform in conditions that would have made most snipers seasick just thinking about them. Her longest confirmed kill, which remains classified in its details, was achieved with a Barrett M107 at 3,176 meters, nearly 2 miles. In winds that were gusting to 40 knots, he paused, looking directly at Martinez. She's forgotten more about long-range shooting than most snipers will ever learn. And she did it all without ever feeling the need to announce it to anyone who would listen. Martinez's apology came out as barely a whisper, but Chun waved it off. "You were doing your job, Staff Sergeant. Range safety is paramount." She turned to address the young Marines. "Can I offer you gentlemen some advice? The loudest person in the room is rarely the most dangerous. The ones you need to watch are the quiet ones, the ones who've already proven themselves in places where nobody was keeping score, where the only metric was whether you and your team made it home. Real competence doesn't need to advertise. It shows up when it matters, does the job, and disappears without waiting for applause." She began breaking down the Barrett with the same methodical precision she'd shown while firing it. "That 1,000-yard shot you're all trying to make? It's not about strength or size. It's about reading the environment, understanding the science, and most importantly, having the discipline to wait for the right moment. The rifle doesn't care if you're 6'4" or 5'2". Physics is physics. Ballistics is ballistics. Training and experience are what matter." Johnson, emboldened by her approachability, asked, "Gunny, that shot in Afghanistan, the classified one. What were the conditions?" Chin smiled slightly, the first time anyone had seen her expression change. "Elevation, 8,000 feet. Temperature, -15 Celsius. Target, a hostile sniper who had already killed 2 Marines and wounded 5 others. Range, classified, but let's just say I had to account for the Coriolis effect, and the bullet was supersonic for 8.7 seconds of flight. The shot took everything I'd learned in 10 years of training and combat. And when I made it, I didn't celebrate. I immediately started looking for the next threat, because that's the job." Word of the demonstration spread through Camp Pendleton within hours, then across the military shooting community within days. The story evolved with each telling, but the core remained the same. A small, unassuming woman had walked into a Marine range, been insulted and dismissed, then proceeded to demonstrate a level of marksmanship that most could only dream of achieving. Martinez himself became one of the story's most enthusiastic tellers, using it as a teaching moment for every new Marine who came through his range. "Assumptions will get you killed in combat," he would tell them. "That day taught me that everyone deserves respect until they prove otherwise, and that real warriors don't need to advertise their skills. The range is far gone." Previously unmarked for 3 years, now bore 5 impact marks in a group that could be covered by a dinner plate. At 2,000 meters, someone had painted a small plaque and mounted it nearby. Chin's challenge, 5 for 5 at 2,000 m. March 15, 2024. Respect is earned in silence. The Barrett she had used was retired from general use and placed in the range's trophy case, a reminder that excellence comes in all packages. Chun herself had disappeared back into the classified world, her brief appearance at the range becoming another legend in the long tradition of military marksmanship. But her words remained, repeated by Harrison at every officer's briefing, by Martinez at every safety orientation, by Johnson at every training session. Real competence doesn't need to advertise. Years later, when the Marine Corps established its new Designated Defense Marksman program, expanding opportunities for smaller-statured Marines to become precision shooters, they named the program's highest achievement the Chin Badge. To earn it, candidates had to demonstrate not just exceptional marksmanship, but also the humble professionalism that she had embodied that day. The badge itself was simple, a small gold tab featuring a bullet in flight over the number 196, the distance in miles of her officially acknowledged longest shot, the classified details finally released after her retirement. Recipients were taught the Chun principle. Excellence is quiet. Competence is calm. Achievement needs no announcement. The principle became a cornerstone of special operations training across all branches, a reminder that in a world of loud voices and bold claims, the most dangerous person in the room is often the one who says nothing at all. General Harrison, in his memoir years later, would write, "In 40 years of military service, I've seen courage in many forms. But perhaps the most impressive was the courage of a woman who could have destroyed every ego in that room with a simple recitation of her achievements, but instead chose to let her actions speak for themselves. She taught us all that true strength isn't about proving yourself to others. It's about knowing who you are when no one's watching." The legacy of that day extended far beyond marksmanship. Young female Marines, who had often faced similar dismissive attitudes, found inspiration in Chin's story. It became a rallying cry, a reminder that their worth wasn't determined by others' assumptions, but by their own dedication to excellence. The phrase "pull a Chun" entered military slang, meaning to quietly demonstrate overwhelming competence in the face of doubt or disrespect. Military academies added case studies about unconscious bias and the danger of surface-level judgments. Chin's demonstration became required viewing for leadership courses, a perfect example of how quiet professionalism could be more powerful than any amount of chest-thumping bravado. The rifle range at Pendleton became something of a pilgrimage site for military marksmen, all wanting to attempt Chin's challenge at the far gong. Few succeeded, but all came away with a deeper appreciation for the skill it required and the humility with which it had been demonstrated. Martinez kept a photo on his desk from that day, captured by a Marine's phone. Chin behind the Barrett, perfectly composed, with the distant gong visible in the background. He would point to it whenever someone made assumptions about another person's capabilities based on their appearance. "That woman taught me more about respect in one afternoon than 20 years in the Corps had," he would say. "She could have humiliated me, ended my career with one complaint to the general. Instead, she taught me. That's the difference between a warrior and someone who just knows how to fight." And in the classified halls of the Defense Intelligence Agency, Chin continued her work, analyzing satellite imagery and providing targeting data for operations she would never discuss. Her office wall held no trophies, no badges, no photos from that day at Pendleton. Just a small note from General Harrison: "Excellence requires no explanation." Thank you for reminding us all. For more stories where proven competence triumphs over shallow judgment and where silent strength defines true worth, subscribe to Unknown Heroine Stories.